20 ounces of red, sitting in your refrigerator door right now. And I'm willing to bet you have never once turned that bottle around to actually read what is inside it. Most people never do. They trust the colour. They trust the shape of the bottle. They trust that if it looks like tomatoes, it must be tomatoes. It is not. And by the time I finish telling you what is really in that bottle, and what it is quietly doing to the people eating off your table, you are going to want to know exactly how I make the version that costs about $1 and takes less time than waiting in line to buy the one you already own. Stay with me, because this is one of those videos where the number at the beginning and the number at the end are not going to match. And that gap is the whole point. I haven't bought a bottle of ketchup since I left, and I don't plan to. Before I go any further, I want you to actually answer this, not just think it. How many bottles of ketchup have passed through your kitchen this year? Once a week, tucked next to the eggs. Every single night, sitting on the table before the food even arrives. Hold that number in your head, because by the end of this, it is going to mean something different to you than it does right now. We didn't have a ketchup bottle in the cellar. We had tomato paste, a little vinegar, a spoon of honey, and salt. That was the whole recipe, and it was never written down anywhere. It was passed hand to hand, the way most things were in that kitchen. Nobody ever flipped a bottle over to study a label, because there was no label to study. There was no need for one. And here is the part that still catches me off guard every time I think about it. The homemade version I grew up on had exactly 4 ingredients. The bottled version sitting in your refrigerator right now has closer to 10. And most of them are not doing what you think they are doing. Now, I want to be honest with you about something. When I first left and started buying groceries the way everyone else does, I picked up a bottle of ketchup without thinking twice. It looked like the same red I grew up with. It was not. And here is where it gets interesting. You are not just handing over $4 or $5 for a squeeze bottle of tomato-flavoured syrup. You are handing over that money to bring high fructose corn syrup into your kitchen disguised as a vegetable condiment, listed high enough on that ingredient panel that it is doing more work than the tomatoes themselves. That is the trade you are making every time that bottle goes in the cart. Not a tomato purchase, a sugar purchase wearing a tomato's clothes. Think about what that bottle is actually replacing on a plate. It goes on the food your children eat with their hands. The fries, the eggs, the meatloaf. The food that is supposed to be simple. And instead of adding a vegetable to that meal, you are adding roughly 4 grams of sugar in a single tablespoon. Sugar that is listed under a name that sounds industrial because it is industrial. You are not paying $4 for tomatoes with a little vinegar and salt. You are paying $4 to put corn syrup on your family's plate 3 or 4 times a week and calling it a vegetable because the bottle is red and the label says tomato first. Keep that thought in your head because in a minute, I'm going to show you exactly where that sentence hides on the bottle itself. This did not happen by accident, and it did not happen because a company set out to hurt anyone. It happened because corn syrup is cheaper than sugar, and sugar is cheaper than real, ripe tomatoes picked at the right time of year. And every one of those substitutions saves the company a fraction of a cent per bottle that adds up across a warehouse full of pallets. Not because they failed, because the whole system rewards the version that costs less to make and still looks the same on a shelf. The tomatoes shrink, the sugar substitute grows, the price to you stays exactly where it needs to stay to feel normal. And once you understand that one substitution, you start noticing it everywhere. which is exactly why I want you to watch what happens when I turn this bottle over. Here is the bottle in my hand, cold from the refrigerator, the plastic slightly tacky, the way it gets after months of being picked up and set back down. I turn it over the way I do every time I film one of these, and there it is in small print. Tomato concentrate first, then a name for corn syrup, then vinegar, then a shorter and shorter list of things that barely qualify as flavouring. I press the sides of the bottle and hear that hollow, half-empty sound most bottles make near the end. That thin plastic give, almost a whisper, right before the last thin stream comes out red and a little too smooth, more like syrup pouring than sauce. There is a price sticker still stuck to the shoulder of the bottle, $4 and change, and I hold it right next to the ingredient panel so both are in frame at once, because that is the whole point. The price and the problem live in the same 6 inches of plastic. You were never meant to look at them side by side. Most people never do, and that is exactly why this bottle keeps selling. If you are the kind of person who reads the side of the jar before the front, you already know what is coming next. And it costs less than the coffee you bought this morning without thinking twice. $1, 4 ingredients, and about 5 minutes standing at the stove instead of 5 minutes standing in a checkout line. Once you see how little it actually takes, you are going to wonder why you ever paid for the bottle at all. I learned this version from a woman 2 farms over, an older cousin by marriage who never once in her life bought a bottle of anything red from a store. She kept a shelf of tomato paste cans in her cellar through the winter, and when someone asked her once why she never just bought ketchup like the English did, she looked at the person like the question did not make sense. Why would you buy something you could make better, in less time, for less money, standing right there in your own kitchen? That question stuck with me long after I left, long after her cellar and her farm were not places I could go back to anymore. And it is the same question I want you sitting with by the time this video ends. The method is short enough that I can walk you through it while we are still talking, so keep your eyes here. Start with tomato paste, the small can, not the diluted sauce. Paste, concentrated, is what gives you real tomato flavour without watering everything down. Stir in vinegar, just enough to cut the sweetness and give it that sharp edge ketchup is supposed to have. Add a spoon of honey, not sugar, because honey rounds out the vinegar without turning the whole thing cloying. A pinch of salt to bring it together. Mix all of that in a small pot over low heat. Let it simmer gently for a few minutes so the flavours settle into each other. Then pull it off the heat and let it cool before you bottle it. Mix, simmer, cool. 3 steps, 4 ingredients, and that is the whole thing. And yes, it really is that short, which is part of why the store version never wanted you to know it. I will admit something, because I got this wrong the first few times I made it on my own, without her standing over my shoulder. I used too much honey at first, trying to chase the sweetness I remembered from store ketchup, and it came out closer to a dessert sauce than anything you would put on a fried egg. It took me a few batches to understand that real tomato paste already carries sweetness in it once the vinegar cuts through the sharpness, and that the honey only needs to be a whisper, not a shout. Once I pulled it back, the whole thing balanced itself out, and that one small correction is probably the most useful thing I can hand you in this entire video. While it simmers, the smell fills the kitchen in a way that bottled ketchup never will, because there is nothing in a sealed plastic bottle sitting in a warehouse that smells like anything at all. This smells like vinegar softening, like tomato paste turning from sharp to warm, a little steam rising off the pot that catches you in the back of the throat if you lean in too close too soon. When it goes into a jar and the lid seals down with that small, definitive click, that sound means something a factory line never will. It means you made it, start to finish, in your own kitchen, in less time than it would have taken to drive to the store and back for the bottle. If you have never heard that sound in your own kitchen, that alone might be reason enough to try this once. Now, I want to be honest about where this falls short, because I am not going to stand here and tell you homemade is better in every single way. This version will not sit in your pantry for a year the way a store bottle will. It needs to live in the refrigerator, and it will not last nearly as long, because there is nothing in it working to extend its shelf life the way corn syrup and preservatives do in the bottled version. If you run out of tomato paste on a Tuesday night, you cannot swing by a corner store at 9 o'clock and grab a can the way you can grab a bottle. This takes a small amount of planning that convenience food is specifically built to remove from your life. I am not going to pretend that convenience does not matter, because it does, especially on the nights when you are exhausted and the last thing you want to do is stand at a stove for 5 more minutes. But here is what I keep coming back to. Standing in my own kitchen with that little pot of paste and vinegar and honey going soft over low heat. Every time you make something yourself instead of buying the version dressed up to look like it, you take back one small piece of a decision that was made for you by someone counting pennies per bottle in a factory you will never see. That bottle in the refrigerator door was never really about ketchup. It was about how easy it has become to hand a company your money and your family's plate at the same time, without ever once being asked whether that was the trade you meant to make. Tell me in the comments how many bottles of ketchup have gone through your kitchen this year. An honest guess, not a careful one. And if you have a family recipe of your own, something nobody wrote down, something you learned by watching hands instead of reading a card, I want to hear what it is. Because that comment section is where half of these videos actually come from. $4 to $5 for a bottle of corn syrup dressed up as a vegetable, and about $1 for tomato paste, vinegar, honey, and salt, standing over your own stove for less time than it takes to unload the dishwasher. That is the whole trade, laid out plain. I still have that little jar cooling on my counter as I say this, the lid not yet sealed, the smell of vinegar and warm tomatoes still hanging in the kitchen around me. I haven't bought a bottle of ketchup since I left, and after today, I am hoping you won't either.